Hi everyone, this is Dr. Nitin Chhoda and welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for being a viewer. Thank you so much for being a subscriber. If you're not a subscriber yet, please consider clicking the subscribe button below and please enable notifications so you get instant updates from our channel going forward. Now, the Senator Mark Warner, who's a Democrat from the great Commonwealth of Virginia, was actually interviewed today on CNN's State of the Union, and he said some very, very interesting things that I'm actually going to highlight in this video. He said that there was initially a group of 8 lawmakers and now it's up to 10 that actually worked through the last 10 days, except Thanksgiving, to try and put together this bipartisan compromise bill. And he said they're going to have a multi-hour call today. Yes, a multi-hour call today. So they're going to be on the phone today for several hours to try and put together a piece of legislation as early as tomorrow. Yes, as early as tomorrow. He also said other things that were very interesting. He said that this was, I quote, a compromise bill. In other words, neither side is going to get everything that they want. Obviously, the Democrats are not going to get $2.2 trillion. And the Republicans are not going to be able to get the sweeping liability protection that they wanted. In fact, Bernie Sanders has a big objection to the liability protection component, and I did cover that in a live stream yesterday. And Bernie Sanders also doesn't like the fact that $1,200 stimulus checks are not included. But take a look at the interesting comments from Mark Warner. And I think reading between the lines, what I feel is that the only thing that's holding this bill back from being passed by the House and the Senate is Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. If a Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, in my opinion, decides to bring this bill to the floor of the Senate for a vote, I believe this bill, at the moment, based on what we are hearing, in fact, Mark Warner himself said, and you'll see that in the interview, that it is possible to get more than 60 votes for this bill in the Senate based on conversations with Republican colleagues. He did say that based on what he knows, that this bill is likely to pass the Senate. So keep in mind that if this bill passes both the House and the Senate, I would be very surprised if President Trump does not sign it into law. And what's even more interesting is that the Democrats think of this, and again, Mark Warner is a Democrat from the great Commonwealth of Virginia. The Democrats think that this is a compromise bill, and they are hoping for a larger stimulus down the road. Let's listen to some key comments from Mark Warner, Democrat from Virginia, and let's hear what he had to say this morning. Let's roll the tape.
To help the millions of Americans who have not suffered like this since the Great Depression. Joining us now is someone playing a critical leadership role in these bipartisan negotiations, Democratic Senator Mark Warner of the great Commonwealth of Virginia. Senator Warner, you've been a critical part of this team negotiating the $908 billion deal. President-elect Biden told me he thinks it should pass, but House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer called it just a starting point for further negotiations. Are Schumer and Pelosi at this point hindering your ability to get this deal done?
Well, Jake, this is a compromise. There's been a group of 8 of us. It's grown to 10 that have worked over the last 2 weeks every day, except for Thanksgiving. We're going to have another multi-hour call today. For those of us who are Democrats, we would have preferred a bigger plan. For my Republican colleagues, they would have liked the plan that Mitch McConnell put out at about $500 billion. This is a compromise. Neither side is going to get the full amount or all the component parts that they wanted. But as you pointed out, with the economy weakening, with 200,000 additional cases of the virus yesterday, and with so many of these initiatives from the first CARES package running out as soon as the day after Christmas, it would be, what I call stupidity on steroids if Congress doesn't act. And we're going to keep at it. I think $908 billion for a targeted 4-month relief plan for a bridge to a Biden administration. I think this is the direction that Congress needs to move in.
Now, the important thing that really jumped out to me there, I don't know what jumped out to you, was $900 billion as a bridge to a Biden administration, as a targeted relief plan for 4 months. So this is very important. The Democrats are not looking at this as essentially one bite at the apple. They're looking at this as, I quote, a targeted relief plan for 4 months and a bridge to a Biden administration. Very interesting comments from Mark Warner. Things actually get even more interesting in this interview because we all know that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was offered right around $1.8, $1.9 trillion by the U.S. Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. And I have always said this on our channel, we will never know if Republican senators would have actually approved that and would have passed that in the Senate. Early indications indicate that they would not have, based on all the reporting I've done. In fact, I posted a video suggesting that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell essentially was torpedoing the whole $1.9 trillion plan by saying, it was essentially a no-go, and he didn't think there was support for it in the Senate. But here's a very interesting comment from Mark Warner. Now, he says his Republican colleagues, I believe he meant to say Democrat colleagues, but he did say Republican colleagues. And he did say that they thought that was an attempt for the president to buy the election. So you can clearly see that all the politics, in fact, I would go so far as to say this is an admission. You can clearly see that all the politics that went on before the election was less to do with the stimulus, less to do with the economy, less to do with helping us, and more to do with trying to prevent President Trump from gaining a political advantage. I think it's now out in the open. In fact, I did do a video yesterday talking about the Pelosi endgame for bigger stimulus, and House Speaker Pelosi did say in an interview yesterday that this was all about a new president and a new vaccine, and that would essentially give the Democrats a second bite at the apple. But I really wish something would have been done before the election. But again, this is where we are, and let's listen to some extremely interesting comments from Mark Warner about whether the Democrats made a mistake prior to the election by turning down the $1.8 trillion offer, considering now that we are all negotiating, or they are all negotiating, about a $908 billion offer that is half that amount. By the way, we still have to see if the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell supports this, and that is going to be addressed later in this interview. But let's see what Mark Warner had to say about the politics of the pre-election stimulus game. Let's watch.
In October, the White House reportedly offered Congress a $1.8 trillion deal, but Democratic leaders said no. They wanted a $2.2 trillion deal. Now you're looking at about half of what the White House offered, and we don't even know if you can get that passed. It seems as though the negotiating strategy of the Democratic leaders, Schumer and Pelosi, blew up in their face to the detriment of the American people.
Well, I will say this. A number of my Republican colleagues dismissed those efforts by the president right before the election because they thought he was trying to, in a sense, buy a win before the election. There's lots of what ifs, what we should have done, could have done. Where we are right now in early December, the clock is ticking. We've got to make sure we pass legislation to make sure the government continues to be funded, a defense authorization bill, and I think potentially the most critical component, this $908 billion that will give targeted relief for the unemployed, for people in food insecurity, rental assistance, small businesses that have run out of their PPP funds. We put additional funds, particularly to those minority businesses that have been extraordinarily hard hit. We put additional assistance in, finally, for broadband, which we all know is an economic necessity, additional dollars around the vaccine distribution, assistance for hospitals. I think we've got the categories, and I think we've got the top line numbers done. We are working right now on language so that we can have as early as tomorrow a piece of legislation. And again, if there are folks on either end of the spectrum that says it's too much or they don't want to go forward, we just got to push through. And I think common sense may this time win out.
Here's another important comment from Mark Warner, and I actually tweeted this earlier today and announced it on our community on our YouTube channel. So please make sure you follow us on Twitter, and also make sure that you follow us on our community, subscribe to the channel. Mark Warner said that they are working on legislation that should be available as early as tomorrow, and he said that hopefully this time common sense can win out. So could we potentially see as early as tomorrow, Monday, a bill? And could we see sometime this week the House voting on it, the Senate voting on it? I would say that is a distinct possibility. I'll keep you posted. I don't want us to jump the gun, but you can start to see the wheels turning, and you can start to see the massive momentum. And in the next segment, we'll see Mark Warner comment on whether the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and whether President Trump are likely to get behind this. Now, keep in mind that Bill Cassidy from Louisiana said that the president supported a $908 billion bill and then went back and said, I support the McConnell plan, which, by the way, is not $908 billion. It's $500 billion. I have done another video on our channel where I've compared the McConnell plan with this bipartisan Senate stimulus plan. So I've actually stacked them up side by side. So you want to check that out. And Tom Reed, who's a Republican from New York, did announce to reporters that he received word that the president was supporting the plan. So the White House has has been somewhat ambiguous on this. But I personally feel that if the Senate Majority Leader he's the key here. I feel if the Senate Majority Leader brings this to the floor of the Senate for a vote, we could see something happen. In fact, let's hear from Mark Warner and see what he had to say. Let's roll the tape.
Your deal does not yet have buy-in from President Trump or Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Is McConnell going to be willing to let there be a vote on this?
Well, that's, again, when you put a bipartisan group together, you're going to end up taking incoming from both sides. I think that's what we signed up for. But again, the same thing I said respectfully to Senator Sanders, I'd say to Leader McConnell, do you really want to send us home without even a vote on something that I have, with pretty high assurance, think would get way beyond 60 votes? The number of Republican senators, both publicly and privately, who've said, hey, you guys have done the right thing, we'll be there, goes up every day. And I think, again, there are a variety of reports of Republican senators who are talking to President Trump about this issue. I think we'll get there. I think we may have to go through a few more days of drama. We're going to keep our head down, working on getting the product out, let the American people weigh in, let all our colleagues weigh in. And I think it'll be a great bridge to the Biden administration.
And in another rather interesting segment, I think two important points emerged from what Mark Warner said. Number one, he did actually comment on what Senator Bernie Sanders said, because keep in mind, this proposal does not include $1,200 stimulus checks, which Bernie Sanders, which Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib from Michigan, the Democrats, have been pushing. And also the fact that the liability protection is an area that is of particular concern to specific senators like Senator Bernie Sanders. In fact, Senator Bernie Sanders is quoted in the next clip. This proposal provides 100% legal immunity to corporations whose irresponsibility has led to the deaths of hundreds of workers. It would continue to provide a get out of jail free card to companies that put the lives of their workers and customers at risk. Now, what's interesting is Warner's response, where Warner says that, number one, Bernie Sanders is not really involved in these negotiations. So, basically Warner is saying that, Sanders can say what he wants, but he's not involved in these actual negotiations. And number two, he did say that the $1,200 stimulus checks is something that the Biden administration will have to, I quote, grapple with. In other words, the $1,200 stimulus checks are going to be the problem, the responsibility, the objective, if you want to use that word, of the Biden administration. This is what Mark Warner said. He said it's something that they have to grapple with, which means that right now, because the Republicans are not going to support anything north of $1 trillion, and I have reported that earlier, the Republicans wanted to keep the cost of this proposal under $1 trillion. Adding stimulus checks would raise it to well over $1 trillion, which is indeed what is happening. That is why the stimulus checks don't have a chance of making it in this bill. In fact, the stimulus checks, if the Democrats push for them, have the chance, they could potentially collapse the entire bill. But let's take a look at these important comments regarding Bernie Sanders from Mark Warner, as well as $1,200 stimulus checks. And keep in mind, Mark Warner is playing a key role in the development of this bill, played a key role in the drafting of the initial plan, and essentially, like I said, did talk about them doing a multi-hour call today to put forward the piece of legislation. So this is really our first look at what's going on behind the scenes, who's criticizing the bill, including Senator Bernie Sanders, and what's likely to happen with the $1,200 stimulus check. Let's roll the tape and you'll see for yourself.
Well, as you know, the legislation you're working on as of now does not provide direct payments to Americans, and it does include some sort of liability protections for companies. Senator Bernie Sanders said because of that, he can't vote for it. He said, quote, "This proposal provides 100% legal immunity to corporations whose irresponsibility has led to the deaths of hundreds of workers. It would continue to provide a get-out-of-jail-free card to companies that put the lives of their workers and customers at risk," unquote. What's your response to Senator Sanders?
Well, my response is, Senator Sanders respectfully is not involved in these negotiations, and his characterization is just not accurate. We are looking at trying to give some level of a timeout to allow states, if they want to put in place standards. We have already, for example, in Virginia, put in COVID standards. That part of the discussion is vigorous and ongoing. And those who want the direct stimulus checks, that will be something that a President-elect Biden will grapple with. We're looking at a 4-month emergency relief package. And I would say to any politician in either party, they're going to go out and tell the tens of millions of unemployed workers who lose their unemployment check on the day after Christmas, people that will be kicked out of their apartments without rental assistance comes January 1st, the small businesses, the restaurants who've been trying to struggle through as the weather gets colder, won't be able to do as much outside dining, that somehow $908 billion, $908 billion, bigger than the whole TARP package, is not enough for a 4-month emergency extension. I'd like to see somebody make that case to people who, if we don't act, will be put in harm's way.
So there you have it, everybody. In the words of Mark Warner, Democrat from the great Commonwealth of Virginia, I think we're going to have a few more days of drama, but I think we're going to get there. And I think this will be a great bridge to the Biden administration. He actually said that for the second time in this interview, that this will be a bridge to the Biden administration, which means we are likely to see a compromise bill right now, a targeted relief bill right now, that will carry us forward for the next few months. Unfortunately, this will not include stimulus checks based on what I'm seeing. And this will, again, I quote, be a great bridge to the Biden administration. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Also, you'll find a link to all of our resources in the description section below. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda with Ignition Time. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. Please click like, please subscribe, please enable notifications. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. I hope you learned something new, and I'll report the news to you as it happens. Our goal on this channel is to present you with the truth. Our goal on this channel is to give you the honest news, because I know you can handle the truth. I'm not going to string you along. I'm not going to give you false hope. But I do have enough confidence in you to know that you can handle the truth. All I ask from you in return is please click the like button, please subscribe, please enable notifications. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.